to our televiewers and audience in the Philippines and around the world. This is Attorney Amihan April Alcazar at AAA Live. At please like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube and Facebook channel. So for this evening's guest, we will have someone who's going to be an expert on English language teaching, and he's actually going to be joining us from Japan. So this is like 1 hour ahead from Manila, Philippines, and where I am currently, it's going to be 14 hours difference from the United States here in America. So I'm very happy to introduce our guest for tonight. So he has, of course, doctorate in education from the University of Reading in England. He also has a master's degree in English language and, of course, his bachelor's degree in English language. So let's all welcome the director of the language programs from the Konan University Hirao School of Management, Dr. Brent Jones. Good morning to you, Dr. Jones.
Good morning, and good evening. Good evening to you, and good morning to the rest of our audience. But I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. So can you please give some greetings to our viewers who are mostly students, parents, and stakeholders of the education sector, because AAA Live is where your academic goals are advanced and achieved.
Right. Well, so I just want to say hello to everyone. And the fact that you're interested in education, I think it's a great place to start. A lot of social change, a lot of enlightenment, it all starts with education. So for education, for educators, for students, for people thinking about getting into education, best wishes. And it's a good place to start. As April said, my name is Brent Jones. And I've been living here in Japan for a little over 30 years, but I'm originally from the West Coast of the United States, and I was in Hawaii from about the age of 16 until I came to Japan in 1989.
Yes. So I think that's a very good introduction, Brett. I'm sure our listeners will be very interested for us to begin with your story. So when and how do you think you actually developed an interest, at first maybe in international relations and later to use English language as a bridge possibly towards an international career?
Right. So I guess, it was my time in Hawaii. And at that time, when I went there, I was still a teenager. And then, even Hawaii, it's like a different country coming from the mainland of the US. And so I was, and also I was in the position of being a minority as well. And so that also helped me kind of open up to, the idea of intercultural communication, intercultural understanding. I wasn't familiar with those kind of terms at that time, but just I was dealing with, different ways of thinking, different ways of communicating. And so that was kind of my entry point. And
so it's very interesting, Brent, because in Hawaii, you would have this melting pot of different nationalities. And you even mentioned, even within the United States, you would be a minority in Hawaii.
That's right. That's right. And there, I had, classmates and neighbors and friends, co-workers and everything. Some from the Philippines. Actually, that was my first introduction to the Philippines. These were second, third generation Filipinos living in Hawaii.
Living in Hawaii.
Exactly. Same thing with Japanese, Chinese, Portuguese. And so it really was a melting pot. I say melting pot, but, they really did keep kind of parts of their own identity, their cultural identity,
cultural heritage,
which really made it's just a great place to grow up, and especially when I was young at that age, it was just a kind of mind opener to, the opportunities that we have in the world. And so then when I got into education, I actually started at University of Hawaii through their Maui campus. So I was on the island of Maui, and while I was in, yeah. So it's a great place. I have really fond memories. My sister's still there. I have nephews and nieces in Maui, and I really love it. But that for me was really key, because one of the things that I did is there was through the library there was I don't know what to call it, but a kind of mentoring center. And so I signed up actually as a mentor, or basically I was helping the exchange students, the foreign students, with mainly with their writing and their different homework assignments that they had at the college.
But were you actually already majoring in English or intercultural
No, no.
communication, or it was different, right?
At that time it was just liberal arts. So
Mhm.
I was, taking classes in philosophy and sociology, economics. So really, really a broad
Mhm.
education.
Mhm.
But
And so
that
what happened with your experience? Actually, it sounds like a peer tutorial or mentoring of these international or exchange students in the University of Hawaii. How did you think the experience of the international students was, especially in dealing with the English language?
Right. Well, so a lot of those things you never think about, and this is a big thing, is unless you're in that situation, it
Mhm.
kind of really is not part of your consciousness. But when I was working with the students, I realized the kind of things that they were struggling with, and some of it was linguistic, but
Mhm.
there were
About
also
the language.
cultural parts of it as well. So that really kind of helped me, trying to put myself into their shoes. And
Mhm.
then I started. Actually, this is a funny story, but uh, my roommate actually uh, said, "Hey, I'm studying Japanese. Do you want to
Really?
join? Do you want to join the class?" And I
Uh-huh.
thought, I'm not doing anything. Sure, I'll take it. And
Okay. Liberal arts education.
eventually he quit, but I continued and I really got
Uh-huh.
into it. And that is when I started meeting more of the international students. So we did have a few
Mhm.
students from Japan. And so we did a program for them. And then
Mhm.
also I had an opportunity to go to Japan the first time. And I know April, Dr. Alcazar, you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, but
Mhm.
that you participated in exchange both as a host
Yes.
and also as
As a
a
student
sojourner.
myself, yes,
Right.
and as a young person.
But I remember, our discussions in the past that
Mhm.
really, really influenced, ideas, and you realize the value. And I really did realize the value of that overseas experience. So
Mhm.
eventually, when I became an educator, I really want to try to, prepare or give those kind of opportunities to my learners.
Yes. So, as a native English language speaker, of course, as you mentioned, you didn't really have to think about or face the kind of difficulties that foreign students would probably be struggling with the English language. So, how did you eventually come to the conclusion that you wanted to actually study more deeply about English language and specifically for teaching the language?
Right. So while I was at the University of Hawaii, while I was on Maui, through my Japanese teacher introduced me to a high school teacher at
Mhm.
the local high school, and they were doing a program for a private school and up on the mountain in Maui, and they
Mhm.
were hosting students actually from Kansai. There's a school called Mukugawa women's junior high school, and university.
So Kansai is the southern part of a region of Japan, right?
So that high school teacher found out that I was working in the mentoring center or helping with that, and so she asked me through my Japanese teacher if I would like to teach this group of students coming over. They were there for an intensive summer program, and
For English.
I've never been a teacher before that, except to
Mhm.
say, like, I used to teach windsurfing on one of my first
Okay, that's
jobs in
different.
Maui. Yeah, but also, I learned about, those kind of baby steps that people need,
Mhm.
so this is a big problem, especially at university, is the
Mhm.
gap in knowledge. University professors often don't remember what it's like to be at a beginner
Yes,
level, and so
exactly.
they're teaching up here, but actually
Mhm.
the student is receiving
Student.
down here, and that gap,
Mhm.
that knowledge gap, really really is important. So
So were
my,
you
my
able to bridge at that point with your first teaching experience with the
no
student?
no, it was a disaster. It
Really?
was Well, it wasn't a disaster. I mean, the materials were prepared for me mostly,
Mhm.
but standing in front of a group, at that time, I think I was probably 19, 20, maybe 21.
So just
And
like our audience, maybe they're deciding what to do with their lives.
exactly, exactly. And the students, there were junior high school girls, and I think there were
Mhm.
probably 30 of them or something. And
Yes.
I was totally unprepared for that kind of situation. So I stumbled
Yeah.
through the
Mhm.
lesson plan. I think they had a good experience. They learned something, hopefully, but
Okay.
looking back on it, it was just like, what am I doing? Um,
Okay. But
but
was
but
it an eye opener for you in terms of making a decision about your career?
it really was. It really was. And then when I went to Japan the first time, it was just for a month, but I really did fall in love, with the country. It's really, I really wanted to know more about it.
Mm-hmm.
So when the opportunity came up, there
Mm-hmm.
was a 1 year program, and I went on that 1 year program. And just as I was finishing that 1 year program, I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking, actually, 1 year is not really enough. That's just
Enough
kind
for
of the
you.
surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I found an advertisement in the newspaper for a Sony Language Laboratory, and
Mm-hmm.
it was for a part-time teacher, part-time English teacher. And so I applied and started working. This is just as I was finishing the program in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was actually when I really thought about, this might be something that I want to do as a career.
Mm-hmm.
At
And by
that
that
time,
time, had you finished your college degree by this time?
yeah, yes, I had just finished all my credits. Actually, when I started, yeah, it's either I had either just got my diploma or just before I got my diploma. That was
Mm-hmm.
the undergraduate, so BA.
Yeah, so that was very crucial about your life decision, actually,
Right,
Brent.
right. But it was
Mm-hmm.
also a really good experience because I was working with a real big range of learners. Some of them were high school students, some of them were housewives, businessmen. And so I also started to see the kind of different needs and
Yes.
realize that there's no kind of unified one size fits all for education. You really have to think about where their learner is, what
Mm-hmm.
their background is,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to make adjustments.
Yeah, so that was more of like targeted learning for your students. So what happened next, Brent, after you had this experience with a wide range of students? Did it lead you to a decision that now you really wanted to pursue this career for English
Right.
language teaching?
Yes, it was around this time. So part of my duties at Sony, well, of course, I taught in-house lessons. Again, people were coming to our school. This was in Osaka.
Yeah.
But they also sent me to different companies. So I was working for a big pharmaceutical company, a big
Mhm.
trading house, a big shipbuilder,
So
and
business organizations, right?
business organizations, right? And one of the things that one of the places that they sent me was a school that was preparing interpreters
Mm-hmm.
for tourists. In
Yes.
Japan, you need a license to be a
To become a
licensed
tourist guide. Yes.
interpreter guide. You need to
Mm-hmm.
pass certain tests, and so
Mm-hmm.
I was preparing students for that test. And it was
Mm-hmm.
about that time that I really saw uh, language teaching as a profession.
Yes.
Before that time, it was kind of a job. It was something that I did, but I
Mm.
never really thought about it as a career. But as I started getting into the real professional side, the
Yes.
business English, and
Yes.
also this interpreter guide test, then I started thinking about a career.
Mm-hmm.
And just about the time, so it would have been around the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000, that Sony sold the department that I was working for.
Yes.
And so that's when I moved into university education. At that time, I started teaching part time at a couple universities. in
Mhm.
Kansai,
Mhm.
and then and also at the same time I became involved in JELT, which you're familiar with JELT. You
Yes.
were brought to Japan as the Asian scholar.
Yes.
Uh, but JELT is a professional organization for language teachers, and that one is probably the most important decision that I ever made was to join that. I
Association.
joined the local chapter
Mhm.
and started taking different roles. I was
Mhm.
program chair for a while, publicity chair, and then
Mhm.
eventually president of the local chapter. But
Yes.
the presentations that I attended, the conferences that I attended,
Mhm.
everything that I did at that time, I was learning, and I was just picking up ideas and kind of
Mhm.
forming my own approach to language education. But
Yes.
that professional organization is probably the biggest step I ever made.
Mhm. So maybe you can differentiate for our audience really when you talked about the difference that you saw between a job and a career, because maybe it is at this point when we are actually conducting like counseling for our audience so that they can try to achieve what their academic goals might be.
Right, right. Well, and of course my path is different, and each person's path in life is different,
Definitely.
and
Yes.
the experiences that we have. But my feeling, like, up until that time is, I'd done quite a few different things. In Hawaii, it's
And
amazing
tried
that,
many things, right?
yeah, I worked for United Airlines. I used to do wood floors, carpentry, work in
Yes.
restaurants,
So
and
exploring the whole gamut of possibilities,
yeah.
right?
And what I tell my students nowadays is each one of those experiences was really valuable in one way or another. It helped
Yes.
me understand, for example, I often use this example with my daughter, but
Mhm.
working in restaurants as a waiter,
Yes.
what I learned is no wasted steps. You don't have time to, take a knife out to a table and then
And
come
then
back and
go
pick up a
back.
glass and
Yes.
take it. You have to think what's happening, and you have to be prepared for whatever comes up. And
Mhm.
so each one of those experiences. But again, when I started teaching, it was another job. I was kind of, seeing what was out there, seeing what kind of fit.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think teaching really caught. And then
Mhm.
again, like I said, when I started seeing the professional side to it, then I
Yes.
thought of it as a profession and
Yes.
a career. And
Yes. So
for
I
me,
think
that was
that's a very important lesson and step for our students to understand that even as they are going through like their studies right now as students, whatever experiences they might be learning will be of value somewhere down the line. But eventually, at a certain point in time, they have to make a decision about the kind of career or calling or profession that they really want to be involved in, so that all of those experiences will be brought together towards a development to become a professional in a particular field. Okay. So
right.
I think, Brent, now that you've decided at this point in your life that you really wanted to make a career out of being a teacher, and specifically for English language teaching, what kind of skills or aptitudes and competencies did you try to develop yourself, and which you believe are important if students would like to follow your career path?
Right. So for me in language education, again, through the connections at the with the JALT, the professional
Yes.
organization,
Of language
um,
teachers, yes.
I was just at first I was just trying to be a sponge. So I tried to read everything.
Mhm.
At that time, we're going back to the 90s and stuff like that, and
Yes.
into the 2000s. But
No
there,
internet yet at the time.
exactly, and there was a big kind of shift. Any kind of field you get into, they go through these kind of paradigm shifts.
Sure.
And
Mhm. Definitely.
when I got into language education, it was the audio lingual method. So we
Yes.
learned through our ears and that kind of repetition, and
Yes.
that kind of faded out. And then there's some fads that they kind of come and go, but I
Yes.
was kind of hungry for everything, and so
Yes.
and doing a lot of reading on my own.
Mhm.
And so then, again, this is like the early 90s, but I realized that I needed more education, more formal education. I was getting a lot of informal and on the job practice, but I reached a stage where I realized that, you know, if I was going to make this a profession or a
Yes.
career, I need
Yes.
to learn more. And that's when I went back and I started studying with Indiana University, actually.
Yes.
And that was the early days of distance education. So actually everything was done by mail. So
Yes. And
they would
snail mail at that time.
I
Big
would
packages.
exactly I would get a package in the mail and it would have my lessons and my
Uh-huh.
syllabus and my reading list.
Uh-huh.
And
And he'll have to
Amazon
mail it back, right?
and Amazon was just starting. So, you know, I'd get my reading list and I could order
Uh-huh.
online, you know,
Yes.
around the, 2002,
Yes.
2003, I could finally order books online.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, and then exactly, I would finish my lessons and stuff. I'd package them up and I'd send them back. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, that I think going back to school
Mm-hmm.
and getting my first master's, and the first master's was in language education, like you
Yes.
mentioned,
Yes.
and it wasn't limited to English language education, and
But
so
general language
right,
education. Mhm.
yeah, and then eventually, or as soon as I finished, or as I was finishing
The
um,
master's
the
program, right?
master's degree, actually we in that program we had to take 3 courses that were outside the department, and that's when I
Okay.
got interested, or I took some courses in instructional systems technology, it's
Okay.
basically instructional design.
Yes.
Instructional design, as you know, it's
Yes.
more for like even for corporate settings, for
Exactly.
for
Yes.
training new employees. So
Mhm.
this is what we want from our employees. They need to be able to do this. This is
Yes.
where they're at. So how
Yes.
can we design that middle part?
Yes.
And
To
so for
achieve the
me,
objectives. Yes.
and this again was the starting of the internet, getting into more technology, educational technology,
Mhm.
instructional technology. So for me, that was like opening a whole brand new world. And
Exactly.
so I put the kind of two together. So as soon as I finished my master's in language education, I started another master's in instructional technology.
Yes.
And so I put those two together. And then eventually I decided that I wanted to take the next step and get the doctorate. And that's when I
Yes.
contacted University of Reading. And that was also not about language in English language in
Language.
particular, but it
Mhm.
was more about language education. My thesis was on English language education.
Mhm. But I think what we're seeing a thread here really is that regardless of what language you might be dealing with, there are many similarities insofar as language education is concerned around the world. It just so happens that, for instance, in your case, you were dealing with English, maybe as a native speaker, and then eventually teaching it as a second language or as a foreign language to your students. And so
Right.
that is sort of like a sub-specialization insofar as the teaching of the language is concerned. So, right now, with all of your work that you have done for this number of years already, so what sort of advice could you give to our students if indeed they were interested in language education, and not necessarily specifically for English, but how to really go about developing their passion for it if they wanted it to be their profession, their career? What sort of skills, competencies, and experiences should they be looking at?
Yeah. So there's a few things. Even before we get to the technological side and the skills side and the knowledge side, I think, just stay hungry. I
Mm.
mean, they're really, you have to look for the things that catch your interest, and
Yes,
also,
exactly.
get again passion. If you're not
Yes,
passionate
that's
about it,
part of it.
it's really hard to continue. And then as far as the skills, there are some, again, I think the reading as much as you can and
Mm.
finding a kind of niche. Like for me, my background, because I taught with Sony and I'd done the business classes, when I
Choices of
started at the
business
university
English, right?
level,
Yes.
I was focused on business English programs. So when I
Yes.
got my first full-time job, I was in charge of the business English program at Kobe Gakuen University.
Mhm.
And so at that time, again, I'd put together, it's kind of like combining different threads and
Mhm.
into your own kind of unique and making your kind of niche. Because
Exactly.
basically what you're doing is you're selling yourself. So what do you
Yes.
have that
Mhm.
somebody else doesn't have? And
Mhm.
for me, I had the language education background. I had started making some websites and, in the early days,
Yeah.
doing online instructional kind of
Material. Right.
tasks
Yes.
and business English. So I put
Mhm.
those three together as kind of my own niche. But um, I think reading in the field, understanding, actually, and this is something that I think is also for language educators,
Mhm.
be passionate about language. Language itself is real, it's amazing, and
It's what
you could,
differentiates the humans from all others.
it really is, it really is. And how it influences our thought. Language influences our thought, the relationship between culture and language, the
Mhm.
difference, like how the brain processes language.
Exactly.
There's so many exciting fields, and there's research, there people are out there around the world doing this cutting edge research in all of these fields, and we
Mhm.
have access to that. I mean, we can,
Right
you
now,
know,
yes.
we can find the journal. Most of it we can find online for free. Of course, some of it, we have to pay subscriptions and
Subscribe.
stuff, but through
Mhm.
libraries, through the internet, we can
Yes.
see this kind of cutting edge research in language education. And that is a super valuable resource. And
Mhm.
that again influences how you teach,
Mhm.
what's your understanding about how the mind processes language, how
Exactly.
we humans acquire a second language. Your
Mhm.
own philosophy or your own worldview will influence how you teach. And so
Mhm.
you have to understand that.
So I think being informed about beyond what is really the skills and competencies of your field is what will enrich, I think, language teaching, because that will be the context and the content itself of like
Right.
language education.
And
So I think,
so I was
yes,
just going
go
to
ahead.
say, I think you also need to appreciate and recognize your weaknesses and blind spots, and be
Mhm.
humble enough to always learn. So I'm not going to say my age, but I
Yes.
still I still consider myself a learner. I'm
Yes.
always trying to look to learn.
And I think
Um,
one of the things that we wanted to emphasize in education is you can be a lifelong learner, a perpetual student, always
exactly,
exploring. And your age
exactly.
won't show despite that. I
I don't
see.
know
So
about that.
yes. So I think, Brent, we've had some very interesting discussion here. And I think for now, maybe we can impart some of our important insights into language education, specifically in English language teaching in your experience. And maybe you can give to our audience, our televiewers, again, part of what you can impart to them for their particular career choices, their decisions that they're going to be making in life. And if they wanted to pursue a career in language education, maybe you can provide them some insights into what they can start preparing right now.
Yeah. I believe networking is super important. So I mentioned JALT, or the Professional Language Teachers Association.
Mhm.
First of all, those networks, um, extend your reach.
Yes,
Again, one person can't know everything, and so the more
not
people you know,
possible.
the more people that you know, the more people that you can talk with and stuff.
Yes.
That's gonna help you, enrich you. And also when it comes to job hunting, that's where
Mhm.
you're going to hear about the jobs. So um, teaching yourself, always being hungry to learn something new. Also looking for that kind of unique connections. It might be technology and language education, or it might be language education and chemistry, or medicine, because that connection, that niche, is going to help make you more marketable. Then, yeah, so that's probably the two biggest ones I would say is networking, keep learning, and then try to find out what's unique about you.
Yes. And this, to our audience, they will want to discover and explore. And I think this is like one of our pathways by which we can provide them more information and knowledge through a virtual broadcast, a reach that normally we will not have the opportunity to have, for example, you speaking to us and having your company. And yet here we are in this age now of technology and virtual broadcast, that we have a wider audience to reach.
Yeah, it's really true. And there's workshops and seminars and online meetings every day. You can find something, there with the different organizations, and somebody is always planning something. So yeah, and so we're, in a sense, we're very lucky. And COVID maybe kind of forced us into this. And some people were more prepared for it than others. But I think, more and more people are going to embrace it. And then it really does. It makes the whole world as accessible to us now.
Yes. So I think with that, we've had such a fruitful discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Brent Jones, our expert in the field of English language teaching. So we're so looking forward to meeting with you again and interacting. And thank you so much for your time. So stay safe and healthy, and we will see you again very soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alcazar. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I really cherish the relationship that we've been developing over the many, many years. So I look forward to many more face-to-face meetings. So I like seeing everybody online, but the face-to-face meetings are it can't be matched.
Yes. So we look forward to that day when it will be all possible again. Thank you so much.